All right, let's bring them all in. In my moment of, look at that picture. I tell you, Chip Griffin. In all of my excitement, I forgot to change my green screen in the Zoom after show to Jan's book, but give me time.
It's okay. Don't forget about it. Don't worry about it.
I'll get there. Don't, just keep me around for one more week, Jan, please.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, man, that was a great show. Jan, there's more to you than meets the eye, my friend.
That's a good thing.
You're not just a pretty face. In fact, there you go.
Oh boy.
You joined the great amazing show, it says on the side.
I've arrived.
I was struggling to take notes initially because I was like I was so in the moment, and then at one point I looked at the time, and I don't know if you can see, but the first note that I put down in my scribble was like 27 minutes. I wrote 1 million push-ups target.
When
and
things
I'm like,
are too
now I'm
good,
just
you forget
thinking
to
of
take
things to write.
notes. But I knew I was going to put Jan's notes right beside my notes. So it says Jan Zlotnick. It's going to say right beside David Hume, Immanuel Kant. I figured I had to have as many notes as I did for them. So I had to start writing, not just staring at the screen saying, oh, this is great, this is great, this is great. So thank you.
Thank you.
Tom, what do you do with all those notes?
Well, I put them in Dropbox and I send them to Joseph in case he ever wants to use them for any purpose. That's what he asked me to do. And so I have now 54 notes on 54 of the guests, and I keep them in a notebook to my left here. In fact, Jan, that was one of the things today that really struck me. I learned in my 10 years in the gym that was just cut short by COVID, my notebook was my best coach. Because if I was going to cut things short and slack off a little bit, I'd look at my notebook to see what I did the last time I was on that machine or doing that exercise. And I said, oh, I got to do more. I mean, my notebook was my encourager. My notebook was my critic. My notebook played so many roles for me, and you helped me understand. So when Joseph got written down in something he said got written down in your notebook today, I mean, that's power, man. That's, the notebook plays a big role. And it would be really interesting. One of our Notre Dame students, a novelist, wrote a novel called The Notebook. It would be interesting to see the role notebooks have played through history, because I suspect they've played a huge role in the lives of creatives in across the centuries.
Yeah, in my notebook, thanks, like I was saying to Joey, in my notebook, I kept track, you can't see it, I guess, of every week.
Yeah.
I would put down the week, the date, and then the number of push-ups I did in each of those days. And I usually would, at the beginning, I was doing it 5-6 days a week. That was too much. Then I did 4 because I took a break in between. There was one week where I did 5,100 push-ups in 1 week.
That's crazy.
That was crazy, and I realized it was crazy, and even possibly would damage me physically for doing it, and mentally it was like too much.
Yeah.
But I averaged over 1,000 a day, which translates into about 1,000 push-ups in a day translates to about an hour and a half a day.
Yeah.
That's insane. So that body, that hard body on the image that I showed, that actually is your body, whereas Joey's was definitely photoshopped. But Joey, what did you think about the image with the actual speaker microphone?
I like having that. That was good. Like I stole that from my LinkedIn page.
I am framing that, Joey.
Yeah.
I have a totally much better body than that dude. And I'm much more humble.
Yeah, right. There you go.
Agreed.
No, I laughed, Jan, because Jan and I would go back and forth where he did tell me he was going to do 2,000 a week because he asked me, he said, how many do you do? And I said, I do 1,000 a week. And I do 500 every 3 to 4 days, depending on my workouts. And so I said, oh, 2,000? You're going to do 2,000 a week just to double me? You son of a bitch. And then I would, when I work out, when I used to fight, I had whoever I was fighting, I would put in my locker, and in there, I would say, somewhere someone else is training harder than you. And when you meet them, they will win. And I would put their picture up, whoever I was fighting. And so now I told Jan, I was texting him, I'm like, I got your picture up, bitch, because I'm not happy that you're beating me, you know? And so every time I actually bought, you know, these dumbbells that you bring into your house. And I showed them to Jan. I'm like, dude, I'm using these now. And I said, you're my dude. Like, you're the guy I have on my locker now, because I need, and this is why we connected, is that we're both competitive. So I was like, I have to beat Jan.
Yeah.
So, like every time I'm working out, when I don't want to do that extra piece or that extra day, I'm like, Jan's doing it. Son of a bitch.
We're in each other's heads.
See that's the power of partnership, and that's competition working right in a person's life. I had the same thing with my when I got serious about working out 10 years when I was 58 years old. I said, I'm gonna work out 2 hours a day, 7 days a week for a year, and let's see where that takes me. And a month into it, I got a workout partner who was much younger, much stronger, surfs 300 days a year, skateboards every day, runs 5 miles a day, works out in every weight imaginable. And he would push me every day to get better and get stronger. And I hadn't done, you guys, it's interesting, the push-ups. I hadn't done push-ups since I was in my 20s. I hadn't done any push-ups. And I didn't do them with this guy for the first 8 years. And one day I realized, I wonder how many push-ups I could do. Probably the most I could ever do in my 20s was 25 push-ups. And I dropped down at the age of 63 or 64 and did 120 push-ups as fast as I could. And I thought I couldn't have done that in my 20s or 30s. But that consistency of going into the gym every day, and even after the first year, we cut it down to an hour a day. Then it became 45 minutes a day to an hour. And it went like that for 10 years. And it's amazing what consistency. Then, of course, I hurt my shoulder, and that's messed me up.
That's what you have to be careful.
You know, I learned when I was doing marathons and other stuff that I'm not in this category, but professionals train to injury. They literally train to injury, and then they have a different regimen when they're injured. Yeah. If they don't train to injury, they're not going far enough. It's a very, very fragile balance. You don't obviously want to be injured to put you out.
Right.
But and that's why there's a lot of swimming, you know, water exercises. When you're injured, you go to the pool and you do a different regimen. When I was doing marathons, I learned that lesson, and it helped me with everything I do, which is if you can run a mile, you can run a 10K. If you can run a 10K, you can run a half marathon. If you can run a half marathon, you can run a marathon. Good thing, because when you're training, you never, at least this was my training, you never run a marathon. Yeah. It's too much.
Right.
So you might run 20, but you'll never go over 20. And over 20 is when the potential of hitting the wall. So, but mentally, you know, I did a half marathon. I know that I can run a marathon. It just clicks in you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting how there's a metaphor, an analogy here in the business world, right? It's great to make mistakes. It's great to try things that fail, but try to avoid the failures that take you out of the game altogether, right? You never want to fail in that.
Yeah, I mean, isn't like physiologically you actually tear your muscles to build them?
Right. Every time, right?
Yep, you break them down.
I mean, Tom.
I was also.
Sorry, Tom. Hey, boys. Tom.
What's up, Richie?
I love your thought of you never want to make a mistake that'll kill your company.
Yeah.
But I'm going to challenge that. If you're not willing to make a mistake, how do you know that mistake's going to break your company?
Yeah, well, you know, here's the interesting thing. I mean, when I apply that wisdom to myself, I first have in mind your life. You don't want to make a mistake that's going to take you out of every game. And then you have concentric circles. What means as much to you as your life, or maybe more. You don't want to make your mistake that takes your family out of the world, right? You don't want to make a mistake that takes you out of the world. And then when it comes to your company, it takes discernment. It takes wisdom. How far can I push this without pushing it over the cliff? And there's some things that are worth pushing over the cliff, and there are other things that aren't. Right. So suppose I make a mistake so big, I try something that's so great. If it works, it'll be the best thing ever. If it doesn't, my business is done. Still, it might be worth taking that risk for a business.
I'm gonna, you know, you're talking about something that's very interesting, right? The big, hairy, audacious goal, right? What Jan was talking about.
Yeah.
And it's funny. I'm sorry I missed the very beginning. I tuned in early, Jaffe, and someone we all know in the industry who is a good friend, and I hadn't heard from a while, and I just reached out, and I knew there was something going on. I said, "Hey, you okay?" And he called me. All four of his parents, his in-laws, his parents and his wife's in-laws have dementia in the middle of COVID. And he and his wife both had to stop working and move in to take care of him. And it's just, and one of them died. And he's like, "Hey, I'm glad you reached out. It's been shitty." So I took the call. So I apologize, guys.
I'm glad you took the call, Richie.
Yeah.
You know,
Of course.
so, you know, I do martial arts. I played rugby. I can't run a marathon, but I can do other things. I still think in the training, and when I played rugby, it was amateur. It wasn't pro at the time. I played for New York and the U.S. Maccabi team, and they pushed us hard. And they pushed us, and you're right, Jan, it's to the breaking point. They don't ask you to jump off the Brooklyn Bridge, but they ask you to do the extra reps, right? So, you know, I know this is a hard analogy, Tom. You're not asking me to kill myself, but I still think, you know, I have to make decisions in a pandemic, running the startup every day to push myself and my company to greatness or to try new things. You got to try 10 new things a day. I mean, one of the questions, Jan, I'm sorry for bouncing. You know, one of the questions I did ask my dad before he died, and I said to him, "How, in the face of all the adversity you faced over your life, do you do this?" And the answer he gave me to this day is just stuck with me. Is like, I get up every morning and I think of 10 things I'm going to try today. I try those 10 things. They work or they don't work. Tomorrow I'm going to come up with another 10 things. So I kind of look at that as your push-ups every day, right?
Mhm.
And just this indomitable desire to keep going.
And
I
consistency.
still think you have to try to make decisions to push your company or your training or your other things that could lead to failure, but you don't know if it's fatal failure, right? You know, Jan could be out there and say, "I'm going to try another 2 miles today." And, you know, the day he does it, maybe for whatever reason, he blows out his knee and he's done for 6 months. But he didn't know he was going to blow out his knee, but he wanted to try.
Richie.
You know what I mean? I'm sorry, I'm rambling, but it's just these are such deep
no.
things.
I'll give you two actual business answers to your question. One is, I did a study at one point. I mean, like informally, whether it was Burger King, Subservient Chicken. The story that I'd heard is that basically Russ Klein, who was the CMO at the time, had looked at this and said, "Yeah, cute idea, but you know, if you basically do this, I'll fire you." And unbeknownst to him, someone kind of lower level had hit basically the publish button. And before they knew it, this thing had taken off. I heard something similar about Apple's 1984 commercial.
Yep.
I've heard that when you look at time after time after time, the great exceptional pieces of work campaigns were literally dead on arrival, had that risk factor, were so on the edge that it could have gone either way and almost were rejected or something happened. The other thing is, and I'll give you a little bit more of a what if, but a very real example. The magazine industry, considering digital and online, this thing called online comes along and it seems cannibalistic and it seems threatening. But if the magazine business, the print business, had just embraced it and said, you know, let the chips fall where they may, right? And worst case scenario, there is no more print and there's just digital, but the pie has grown and we're dominant and we win. You know, that's a different way of thinking of killing the company, of being able to, you know, the only thing to fear is fear itself. And it's dealing with this uncertainty, with the risk, with all of these factors that generally are not undertaken. Why? Because people, whether it's just the fear of failure or it's the political aspects, but those are two examples of where I think that could apply.
So read Ad Exchanger, Zach Rogers asked me to write an editorial, which got published yesterday, about the original sin of internet advertising. And they wanted me to be really controversial and talk about what we did wrong over 25 years. And I did. And I published it yesterday. But what I tried to do was take a hopeful stance. And Jaffe, I bring it up because I tried to, you know, in 800 words to say what was wrong in, you know, 25 years is impossible. But I tried to make the point that we were so afraid to do something new that we just did things that didn't work for 25 years. But I took a different tack that Zach didn't ask me to do, but now he really likes. I tried to take a hopeful look at what we can do in the future to really capture identity and make this thing work. Because my supposition is, if you're being honest about it, Jaffe, last 25 years of internet advertising has been a pretty big failure. We haven't achieved what we did with television advertising on outcomes and other things. We haven't achieved what people have thought we've achieved. And we've really gone down a rabbit hole that in the last 10 years has pissed off the consumer so much, it's directly tied to the rise of privacy regulations around the world. And part of that was print people saying, oh my God, we've got to protect our print thing. Let's just do this. And nobody embraced it. And Jaffe, I couldn't agree with you more. I think if the Time Incs of the world, instead of Don Logan saying it's the big black sucking hole of death, if they had dove in, I think the internet would be a completely different place than it is today. And I don't think they did. I think we've lost the belief in real content. And I think that is a massive problem. And I think people smarter than me could drive a straight line between that and the fact that we've lost trust and we're in a post-truth world. It used to be the editors made sure that it was fact-checked and it was true. We've lost, and the print people were the editors. And I use that as an analogy for most of the media business. I think we've lost the editors. And I think that could kill our society.
You know, that's interesting, Richie. I just read a book this week that I bought 45 years ago, and I just read it. It's James Thurber's book, The Years with Ross. It's about the editor who created the New Yorker magazine. And it's about how important in the early years of the New Yorker in 1925, how crucially important editing was and content was and fact checking was and getting everything right. It's amazing. You know, that was the emphasis. It was a mania. This guy, Harold Ross, was a nutcase about getting everything right. You even see these long query letters reprinted by Thurber on a short article. Ross would write as much as the author did, questioning everything about that article. Let's get it right. Get content right. You have to get content right.
Well, you read the book that Ronan Farrow wrote about, catching the book he wrote about how he broke the whole story of Weinstein and how NBC didn't fact check and the New Yorker did. I mean, it's a phenomenal, fascinating case study in that.
Yeah, it is. It is. And Ross started something in 1925 that continues to this day, which shows you the importance of starting something right. You know,
dude, did anybody read the article in today's New York Times about the mochi stand in Kyoto that's been there for 1,000 years?
No.
It's fascinating. It's all about the concept of doing it right.
That's good. That's good.
I will ask this to you guys. There's a bunch of smart people here. Is there an issue around short attention span theater as it relates to the audience in which we catered to? So I've been in the business for 20 years. I'm a big reader because I'm older. Our younger generation doesn't read. I mean, I talk to a lot of young people that haven't read a book in a year. And there's all these stats out about how many people have yet to read a book since they graduated from college. Do people read a book a year? So the New Yorkers of the world, the Atlantics of the world, long form content in general. If I read something from the New Yorker, I believe it. So they still have it, to your point, Tom, right? The Atlantic, I believe, New York Times does a good job, but they release 200 articles a day. So it's really, and they fall down a couple, 3 times out of those 200, which really hurts their legacy and their reputation. The problem there is that they need to get it out now, right? And that's a big issue. Is if you have an editor that's double checking, more notes than the actual content that was drafted, you're not going to get it. Everything's tied to money. So the problem isn't that, the free press, if we actually could have something where you had storied journalists who allowed to take the time to draft the proper content, to have it fact checked, numerous times, and then say, okay, let's let this go. Then who reads it? Right? I mean, there's no money.
I have a very strong thought on that, and it's something that I did even as a strategic planner early on in my career, is I would always start off and I would say, what is the role for marketing? What is the role for messaging or the role for the brand? And I think what's really happened is there's been such a blurring of roles that there's been a confusion, to your point. So for example, when you see Maggie Haberman from the New York Times on CNN this morning, like, what is going on? Why are newspaper journalists now television stars? And
Money.
yeah, but what's really happened is someone got confused didn't understand the application of what we consider to be cross-platform or multimedia. And what they've done is they've confused it by, it's what Rich is kind of saying. I mean, not kind of saying, it's what Rich is saying is that what we ended up doing is just, look, the first television ads looked like radio ads because people didn't understand how to use the medium. So you just had people basically doing live reads. And so what generally happens is a new platform takes the shape and mirrors the one that just came before it. But there has to be evolution and change. And I jotted down something, I think even as Tom and Jan were talking earlier, which is there is a second part to this idea of consistency. I could do Corona TV every day for the rest of my life, and it wouldn't grow if not for the second part, which is change or evolution or growth. So it's not just good enough to do the same damn thing every single day. You have to get better at it. You have to mix it up. You have to evolve as well. Otherwise you get stale. It's the same reason why just doing push-ups every single day and nothing but push-ups, you're going to end up looking like, we're going to pump you up. You're going to end up looking very top heavy and out of proportion. And so for me, I love all these concepts today. One is we're talking about getting it right? The what was it, the mochi shop or whatever the case may be.
Steve,
one is doing it properly, doing it right, and then just staying the course. The other one is consistency and then kind of growth.
So Jaffe, are you saying mentorship? You're actually saying, so I do martial arts, right? And I think Jan said this in his talk. We talk about martial arts. The journey up a mountain starts with the first step. Jan, you said that, didn't you? In the CoronaTV,
Yeah.
The first step. But then you got to keep making the steps. And there's a lot of concepts in martial arts that you have to keep heat on or the water won't be boiling. But like, I work out by myself because I'm high enough. I don't get better when I was hiding for Corona up at my cottage because my sensei, my 9th degree that I train under, my mentor, my teacher, sensei means teacher, was down here. And until I got home at the end of October and started going back to my Sunday morning black belt classes where it's 4 or 5 black belts, and the 9th degree makes fun of me and teases me. And he's Mr. Miyagi, not the bad guy from Cobra Kai. He's the good pusher. And he says, what are you doing with your hand? And I've been doing, 10 pasais, which is this ancient kata a day for 6 years. And I'm like, oh, fuck, what did I do? So it's not just the repetition. You need the teacher.
Yeah.
Right? You need more knowledge than you, because you can't be the smartest guy in the room. And kind of what Joey's saying is, you needed a trainer when you were fighting, right? You didn't just jump the rope and do that, put the picture up. You need somebody to work on your technique. I'm worried that these kids don't understand about reading and short attention span, and they think they're experts and they don't realize that they're just beginners.
I would say the same thing, Richie, because I studied Kung Fu, and Wing Chun is an art that can't be learned today by young kids. My Sifu is now 80. He just retired. He can still kick my ass. He's 5'6", 130 pounds. And every same thing, I would come in and I'd put my arm this way and he'd grab me and say, hey, why is this here? No, here. And then like, okay, sorry.
Yeah,
and so
it's here.
It was,
it's here, not here. Right?
Not here.
Wait,
you get hit here, you're done.
his name is Shifu from Kung Fu Panda?
No, stop.
Sifu means master in Chinese.
So
but
the
idea
in Japanese, it's Hanchi. So you guys think that, this is okay, this is not okay, this is okay. You're like, what's the difference? There's a huge difference
I think
between
this,
this and this.
Richie, cruelty to dogs is not tolerated on Corona TV.
I forgot. Is that my virtual background? I'm sorry.
I was just saying the same thing, Richie, is that it's the same thing around long form content. I think to get it back to that is that people want to learn like the gym I went to last, which was over 10 years ago now, was all MMA, right? Because every young kid that wants to come in, they want to fight. They don't want to learn kata. They don't want to learn Siram Tao. They want to learn how to fight. And that's cool because I love fighting too. That was the reason I enjoyed it. But it's whose fault is, I guess what I was trying to say about long form content, because older people read it. Like we read it. There's a whole bunch of old white dudes here, right? We all read it. But there's everyone outside of that who's reading long form content. I mean, that's the biggest problem, even as an author, right? Jan, part of the reason I think your book is so relatable is that it's absorbed instantly. Like it's the questions are cool. And even when I commented on it originally, it was like, oh, it begs more questions that beg more issues that help you understand self. And it's short and it's wonderful. I think if you look at something like The Immortality Key, the Brian Maruscu, the guy you interviewed, I've read that book. And to read that book, I have to read with books next to me. So it was such a opus on, and Tom, I can't wait to talk with you about this book, specifically your background in the Greeks. But it is a book that made me had to dive back into the road to Eleusis and have to read other books, Michael Pollan's book around psychosilvin, around all these. And so when you read a book that's that dense, you have to actually go and get other pieces of information to understand the book you're reading. So it's taken me 50 hours to understand what this guy's book was. And how many people are going to do that? I mean, I'm
what's the
unemployed.
name, Joey, what's the name of the book?
The Immortality Key by Brian Maruscu. And it's all about how Christianity's origin from Eleusis, which is 14 miles outside of Athens, had these ceremonies that allowed people to experience God through the Koukion. The Koukion itself was this mix, and they still have no idea what it is, that Plato and Marcus Aurelius, and I mean, all of these people went to these actual places and experienced this. It's an incredible book. Joseph interviewed him a month or so ago.
It's about, in a way, it's about psychedelics and how psychedelics.
Well, and the importance of connecting to God, yeah.
And big experience.
Yeah, I mean, and so they basically, he's basically saying that all the origins of Christianity is different than we understand today. And as a recovering Catholic, it's one of those things where I'm like, oh, I had to dive into this. I have to understand this. And it's the best book I've ever read, ever, trying to understand the origins of spirituality, God, Christianity, the Romans. It's
you know
just
what?
incredible.
And here's the interesting thing. The red thread here, as Joseph likes to say, connecting what you've just been saying. What did Brian do? He started asking questions nobody else was asking. And he didn't just sit at his desk and ask the questions. He went to where he needed to be to ask the questions well, which connects back to Jan in his teaching us how to approach people and go to where we need to be. Find that loved one you've been estranged from. Find that older person and ask them those questions. I had a phone call the other day from a relative by marriage who's 80 years old, and it was one of the most wonderful phone calls of my life. I'm ashamed that I didn't initiate it. I had to wait for him to initiate it. He was doing what Jan recommends. And to link it to Richie, and what Richie got into about businesses and risk and all that, Aristotle thought that one of the most important things in life is excellence. And you never get to excellence without pushing. But Aristotle also had this
Vince
idea.
Lombardi.
Right. And Vince Lombardi and Aristotle. He also had this idea that for every human strength, and our word now is virtue from the Latin, for every human strength, there is a too little and there is a too much in your response to a situation. Like the courageous person, the too little is cowardice, and the too much is foolhardiness. And Aristotle believed that when you push yourself or when you push your business, it's a function of wisdom in your life that you accumulate over the years to know how far to push. And other people can't tell you that because they may think you're being foolish. They may think you're being crazy, but you know better. Because every great creator or inventor has been told he was crazy. Right. So we have to learn to push to that excellence, that Goldilocks zone. It's not the too little, it's not the too much, but it will take us to excellence.
Isn't that Steve Jobs saying, be foolish, be hungry?
Yeah.
Stay hungry, stay foolish,
Stanford
right,
address, right? But by stay foolish, he was being playful because in the eyes of others. Steve never did things that he thought himself was stupid or foolish or crazy, but he would often do things that other people thought was stupid or foolish or crazy. And when he could convince them to do what they believed was foolish or crazy,
well, that's when he knew he was onto something.
right?
People
That's
said
right.
that you were crazy. You know,
That's right.
Richie, your idea of taking the risk that could destroy the company is there's a lot about the approach, the tone, the personality, and how you can get that in steps, like you say, one step at a time. So if you look at the author, if you look first before diving into the book, like Joey did, because Joey didn't just dive into the book, really. He heard something more digestible, which was the show that Joseph had and Joe Rogan had with this author. And that's the digestible part that you look at and say, now I want to read the book. So that's smart marketing. And it's also very human. This guy who wrote the book has a sweet, open, humble personality. And he, at one point, said that he risked his marriage with writing this book.
Yeah.
That because of the pain of writing this book, the travel, the intensity of search and discovery, it risked his family life.
Yeah, it took him 12 years to write the book, and the research, it's absolutely out of hand how much. And this guy was a classics major at Brown, so he's fluent in Latin and Greek, and then he was also fluent in Sanskrit, which just blows my mind. So anyone who studies theology, philosophy, spirituality, if you can't read Sanskrit, you're reading translations.
And
so that's
again,
why he studied Sanskrit.
And again, tying it to our guest today, also a graduate of Brown University, the fine institution of Brown University, and a major in what, Jan? What were you a major in?
Semiotics and English, but semiotics, yeah.
See, I love that because it took me long enough to explain to my mother what philosophy was. I could never have brought home semiotics. What he majored in? I'm semiotics, Mom. You know, that would have led to more than 23 questions on the part of my mom to me that I couldn't have survived, I'm afraid.
I loved how when Brian was on my show, his quote that he had to decipher, I wrote it in Sanskrit. Do you remember that?
Yeah, I remember that. You're a very clever host.
I think I gave him the Monty Python line, which is, I think it loosely translates to, "My hovercraft is full of eels."
Hey, Joey, did you read the Michael Pollan book, How to Change Your Mind?
Yeah.
Same thing. And that's part of, there's that Michael Pollan, there's a guy named Carl Ruck, there's Wasserman, all these guys they wrote a book in 1978 called The Road to Eleusis. And I had to read that to basically understand better what was going on with Brian's book.
Joey,
Brian, that it was the Michael Pollan thing, right? That how it's been in all these different religions.
Yeah.
Well, ayahuasca too, which is another thing I had to study because I didn't really understand that. And so it was one of those things where it's like, this book just blew my brain outside. And my wife's like, because I read a book a week. And so I probably got 5 books that week. And my wife's like, okay, you need help. Do you need your meds? Like, no.
See, when I read, it's always been the Oxford Compact Oxford English Dictionary next to me to look things up. You're setting a new standard though, Joey. Now I have an app on my phone, a dictionary app, and I'm embarrassed to say that when I was reading the last 5 pages of the James Thurber book, The Years with Ross, I had to look up the word persiflage. I didn't know what persiflage meant.
What, Tom? You don't know what persiflage is?
I didn't know what
I don't know.
persiflage is.
I'm shocked.
And then
Shocked.
the first definition I got was raillery, and I had to look that one up. And pretty soon I was doing a forced death march through Merriam-Webster because I'm never engaged. I don't know anybody who ever engages in persiflage or raillery.
Well, tell us what it is, and I guarantee we'll never forget it.
Yeah, well, it's kind of teasing. It's silly talk where people are teasing each other, people who like each other. That's why I say I don't know anybody who ever does that, and so that's why I didn't know the word.
I'm going to actually rename this the Persiflage Show.
The Persiflage Raillery Show. Yeah, that's what it is.
Just the after show. That's kind of like me dressing up for Jan today and dedicating the entire soliloquy on criticism
Mr.
That will definitely
Garfield,
drive viewership.
contemptuous mockery or banter, Mr. Garfield has just put into our chat. Yeah, that's right.
You know what we
Now it's count on
we
T.
basically said I basically said to Jan, I mean, to finish the conversation from yesterday, which is when somebody offers criticism off the bat, it tells you, and I addressed it briefly in the soliloquy, it shows you that they're comfortable enough and they care enough to provide you the feedback. And what I realize is when you say I'm terrible at taking, I say when I'm terrible at taking criticism, that really says a lot about you, about the person, and it actually shows, and it's a real opportunity and requirement for growth. And that's why yesterday in that conversation, it was great. I will not wear that Spider-Man t-shirt again for two reasons. One, I have a Hulk and a Superman one as well. and until I exhaust those, two, I'm trying to keep the dry cleaning bill low with respect to suit and tie. But it was actually a very meaningful conversation we had, Jane, yesterday, believe it or not. And by the way, thank you for stepping in, because Jan only at 7:30 last night said he was in for the show.
That's great.
Well, you've trained me over the year of how to do the show. So
It's the truth.
And Joseph, I'm just happy you wear clothes. Any day you wear clothes and it's not that naked day or whatever you had.
Oh yeah,
It's a
that's
good
We
day.
still
That's
we
really
still don't
Yeah.
know if he actually has pants on though.
We don't want to know.
want to know.
Yeah, we don't
Do
want
not-
to. We don't want to
please,
go
no.
there, Bob.
Sit down.
All right, everyone. Today, I would say the after show epitomized the persiflagerie of this camaraderie of this little group. And by the way, I'm convinced that what Tom Morris does is he has his dictionary, he puts it behind the camera, and he goes, well, that reminds me of the word persiflage, which is from the ancient Egyptian persiflagus. And
We all have our tricks, right?
Your
did I
voice
just
impression is not very good.
did I just persiflage you?
I would
Did
like
I just persiflage you?
I'd like to offer a sign-off gesture that we learned from Linda Cohn, and that is hand on the heart, because I felt it from,
Yeah, you too, man. This was really a great
Seriously.
day.
Back
This
at
was
you, bud.
really a special
Yeah,
episode.
right there.
Thank you so much.
Jan, for you, it's hand on the shoulder from too many push-ups, but
He
will
can't
be
reach his
my
shoulder.
joke.
He's so bulk.